Welcome to another exciting episode of the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. I'm your host, Tom Schwab, author of Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. And today we're diving into the game-changing approach to leverage your podcast interviews for maximum impact. You've heard me say it before. Don't just do more interviews, do more with your interviews. My Beth Trejo from ChatterKick is a master at this. Her agency is revolutionizing how businesses use podcast content to drive authentic engagement, create human connections, and generate lasting results. We're talking strategy, repurposing, and the kind of tips that can turn a single podcast into a month's worth of valuable content. Beth's insight are a marketer's dream and a creator's ally. Whether you're an introvert looking to leverage your voice or an executive wondering how to get more from every conversation, this episode will empower you to rethink your approach and multiply your results. Stick around. You won't want to miss this one. One of the things you'll often hear me say is don't just do more interviews. Do more with your interviews. And that's why I'm so excited today to introduce my friend, Beth Trejo from ChatterKick, who does it with excellence. Her agency goes beyond just social media, the strategy they have behind it and how they use podcast interviews and really content as foundational content to get more out of it is amazing. So excited to have you here, Beth.
Thank you so much, Tom. I look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how in the past you have used content. I know you used to send crews to your clients' offices to take video so you'd have that, that content to repurpose.
Yeah. So, we have always had real content at our core. So I think that's one of the things, starting a business, it was 13 years ago. And I just knew we had to have good videos of clients. We needed pictures of them. And that would outlast algorithm changes. That would outlast, changes in marketing behavior, all of that. And it really was establishing that human connection on behalf of a brand and an individual. And so, yeah, we've had that kind of at our core. We've expanded across the country. We still send photo, video content captures out to, to our clients' sites across the country just to get that. And so when the pandemic happened in 2020, and even before that, when podcasts were really becoming more than just a quick fad, they were tools and more accessible for businesses to use them. We really started leveraging that form of media to supplement and sometimes, give another voice to our clients. I think the thing that's amazing about podcasting specifically and audio is the intimacy that you get with the individual because you're in their ear, right? There's something about being so close in audio that you don't always get in video. You don't always get in still shots. And so we just, podcasting, whether it's some of our clients are guests, some of our clients have their own podcast, it's just a really great media to help tell the story of their business and why they started and really what they were ultimately trying to do in growth and awareness.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when we first started about 10 years ago now, for that first few years, I'd give the elevator pitch and people would go, what's a podcast? And now it's like the credibility. Oh, they were seen on a podcast. And so people are familiar with the content. And it's interesting. You said audio and, podcasts used to just be audio. Now 80% of them include the video too. So how are you using those now that you've got both audio and video from the clips?
Well, it really is kind of a marketer's dream because when you have the full format, you then get to decide how you want to recreate, repurpose, edit it, and you have way more flexibility. So that's why we do like our podcast on video, because even if we decide only maybe to use an audiogram or, we take a piece of the audio, you don't have that option if it's not video too, right? So you need both to be able to tell a good story, and it gives you a lot more flexibility in content and just more choices. So yes, we do like to use the entire video. Sometimes we'll take small clippets of it. Sometimes we'll even take screen captures, and we've made like memes out of a quick bounce of the video. We have done vertical videos, even if the film or the podcast wasn't filmed in a vertical format. You can still get creative and find different ways to get content out of it. So we try to repurpose and reuse as much as possible on our podcast, because they really are just a treasure trove of information and assets, right? You get photo, video, because photo, you could take stills of the podcast. Video, you have the video of the people interacting or speaking. You have the audio only, and then you can take those and, make them even in more pieces. You have the transcript, you have quotes that may come from the video. So there's just a lot to be had as it relates to how you could use one small piece of time and make it, go a long ways.
Well, I love how you said a marketer's dream, because I can think of Tiffany, our marketing manager, right? I can ramble for 45 minutes and she'll find 60 or 90 seconds of brilliance in there in order to get the clip. But I look at it from a creator's dream also. So as I remember years ago, you were explaining your process to me where you would send the crew out there. I would be so nervous with that, right? I've done television, I've done radio, but to me that's stressful. Right? Oh, do I look at the camera? Don't I look at the camera? Whereas I find myself more comfortable on a podcast interview, right? Because it's just a conversation. And so many of our clients, and I think people that use podcast interviews effectively tend to be introverts. So, it's a comfortable surrounding for them. Do you find that it's less intimidating for your clients to just grab clips from a podcast than it is to put a camera in their face?
Yeah, we were actually just having this conversation this week with one of our clients, because they had asked one of their team members, hey, would you just go film a quick video for us? And the team member's like, no, absolutely. Like, I'm not doing that. I don't like to be in front of the camera, etc. And then we decided to do a podcast, like webinar. And they're like, oh, I'm so excited about this. I'm going to hop and it's like, that is the same thing, but there is a dialogue there. And I think that kind of removes some of that anxiety, because it's a conversation. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, especially for executive leaders, this format of podcast and video podcasting works so well because they just have to show up and have a conversation. They don't have to do a lot of pre-prep work. They don't have to get a lot of, maybe their team along the way. And so it really becomes show up and, speak, have a conversation. And then maybe their teams will help with the post-production stuff. So that is really awesome for a lot of our leaders within the organizations, because it just feels less intimidating, like you said.
And it's interesting too. I've seen marketing teams get so much credit for it because the CEO, the talent, will show up and do a 45-minute interview. And a week later, they've got all of this repurposed content. And they're like, this was a good use of my time. Because sometimes if they're just on a one-on-one call or speaking from personal experience, right? I go to meetings, but you fly to the meeting, you spend a night in a hotel, you've got the PowerPoint, you're hoping the slides work, and you've spent 2 days and you're wondering, what impact did I make? Whereas I can carve out 45 minutes on a podcast interview and the marketing team gets a month's worth of content out of it.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes what people forget, like that you can have a internal podcast dialogue discussion. And it is really still interesting for a lot of people. And they're always thinking like, you have to have all these big guests or you have to have, a lot of coordination of that. But I've seen some really great formats where it's internal teams with a visionary, with somebody that's telling the story. It's awesome to use for onboarding or orientation or training. You can use it. Again, that content is gold for showcasing your values across your online presence. And it really is, a very good use of the leader's time because you can just use it so much.
Yeah. I remember one of our clients pointed out that we all create just as much content as Gary Vaynerchuk does, right? The only difference is that he's got people with video cameras following him around every place. And while I wouldn't want that, when we do calls, right? Now it's so easy to record the calls, and, with both people's permission, using that content in different ways.
Yeah, I think that the transcripts, we actually are using this to help connect sales and marketing a lot faster. So let's say that your salespeople are constantly on video calls or they're having these conversations. And sometimes marketing may not get the information of the most frequently asked questions until much later, right? Maybe during a quarterly review, maybe it's content planning. But because these tools allow us to analyze the transcripts so quickly, and AI tools specifically, now you can take all the problems that your prospect was just showing, get all that organized, send it over to marketing, and marketing can speak to how your business or company addresses those issues. And you can really just constantly recycle and repurpose and tailor and tweak those questions. And they're really great content topics for longer form, like a podcast too, because the frequently asked questions that you're getting in your sales process, that's what your prospects actually want to know. And so you should address those and answer those if possible.
I was going to say, behind the curtain here, that's what we're doing, right? So we've got fireflies on all of our client calls, be it a discovery call, a roadmap call, a kickoff call, or the monthly optimization calls. And it's pure gold in there. So to take that and throw it into like a chat GPT and say, what are the biggest questions? What are the biggest concerns, right? What are the pain points? And what we found before is we would do call them postmortems every month, right? But the problem is you remember the frequency, right? The last question you were asked is the one that comes to mind. Having AI go through that can find all of those. The other thing that we've been doing with that is, you had said the transcripts, even transcripts from podcast interviews. What are the themes that are in here? What are the most commonly asked questions by the host? Things like that. So you can get, when somebody does an interview a week, right, you've got 4 hours of content there every month to look at and just pull out the gold.
Right. And I think people forget sometimes that what you were talking about right there also can be a starting point for your next iteration of content, right? So it's not just about what you actually get from it. Yes, you can take that quote. Yes, you can like piece up the podcast, but what else are you taking to then propel you forward and get better and get more specific and more aligned with your target audience? It's what you said right there, right? It's planning, it's dissecting, it's researching what is actually going on. And because especially if you're in the moment, you may not even realize, right? It's a conversation, it's a dialogue. And so having someone on your team go through that is really impactful.
Yeah, it's that old thing, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. So you talked about refreshing it. How often are you looking to do that with your clients, right? Because it always amazes me if somebody's doing the same messaging for years. Come on, the market's changing. You're learning more with that.
So I think, every single month we have an annual content planner for most of our clients, but every single month we have a pretty strict checkpoint to make sure that like, is this still relevant? Maybe we have a general topic, but from that general topic, we want to get more timely or more specific with something that's actually happening. So I do think that agility is really critical. And I think marketers are planners these days, and having that ability to use data and your intuition and your heart is such an interesting balance right now in marketing. And so you have to kind of bounce both of those two things off of each other. But I do think at minimum, looking at this stuff monthly is important. And then the other thing is there's a lot of content that one generates, whether it's a podcast you did years ago, that is still relevant. There are pieces of it that are still relevant. There are definitely things that you can pull out and extract. We try to set goals on behalf of our clients, how much content is repurposed each month. And that doesn't mean that we're not touching it and we're just reposting, although sometimes that's okay too. You can literally repost. The people don't remember. Even if it's like twice a week, the people don't remember. And you're probably going to reach different people, but go back to your old content and rewatch it. Because it's amazing how some of the things that you said that didn't feel impactful at the time now are like, wow, that's still really true today. Or, wow, I was really wrong about that. Let me talk about why that didn't come to fruition, right? Like you can give yourself perspective on your old content. So there's just so much you can do with it.
So do you do anything intentionally then to make sure that the content is timely, but also timeless?
I don't think in the moment we're doing anything intentionally, because I think, we want to be able to have the most natural and authentic content as possible. Questions always work well, right? Like asking someone questions, the answers to those are usually great for clips or sound bites, or, being able to continuously repurpose. But I think when you go back, you just have to have yourself organized. You have to have your assets organized. You have to have, the topics that you spoke about organized, so you don't have to go rewatch 300 videos, right? Like that does make a difference. But there's a lot of that, especially if it's higher level theory or vision or mission, that it really does last, and people like it again.
Yeah, it's interesting when we're talking to our clients. It's like, be careful of saying things that could tie it to a season, right? So I don't care if it's the week before Christmas. Don't wish them a Merry Christmas,
right? There you go.
When it's being recorded, because sure, it might be appropriate there, but when it's after it's edited and it goes out in February, it sounds dated. It sounds really funny in the middle of summer. Or if you're watching an interview and they're all dressed up for winter, right? It should sort of be a generic thing there. We've even had people that would say, my book is coming out in November.
What November?
November of what year, right? If it's this year, that makes sense. But, if I'm halfway through the summer, it's like, well, I don't want to pre-order it. Because it's not coming out till next November. Or if you say, it comes out November and put the date, it's like, oh, that's an old book. So trying to make it timely and timeless.
Yeah. And I think there's like little tricks to that too, right? Like, I'm excited to talk about the book XYZ, and then use copy within the post to actually talk about the timing and the drop dates. That way you can not get yourself in that position, like you were saying. And copy's easy to change in and out with the seasons, right? That's a lot more flexible than editing video or audio to make it go back.
Now, do you find that the video gets dated?
I don't know. I was looking, so I've been doing this for 13 years. Obviously, as humans, we change. We look different, in the last 13 years. But I actually went through some of my it was probably several years in, content. And the team had put it together and sent it to me for approval. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is not, like, social media has changed so much in this time. And it was a clip from a podcast. And the quote that they pulled, I was like, you know what? That's still relevant. It's still real. I may not have the same hairstyle as I did then, but I mean, only my close family and friends are going to know that. And also, does it really matter? I think that there's definitely some longevity with that. Other things, have a critical eye if it's not like culturally significant or relevant. I think that is something to kind of take a quick peek at before you post.
Yeah. My, once again, Tiffany, our marketing manager, I think if I ever shave my beard off, she'll Photoshop it back on, because what she said was that all of a sudden things looked dated. And the brand had changed. So that's one of the things that, even, at times, what's your corporate brand, right? Dave Ramsey, every time you see him, love him or hate him, he's going to show up the same time. He's got jeans on, a shirt, and a blue blazer, right? That's his corporate uniform. And I saw some people at times, like during COVID, working from home, they went from suit and tie to hat on backwards. And it's like, is that really what you want out there long term with it?
Right. And I think, everybody has their own preference of that. And I think, that's why the organization is so important, keeping your files organized so that you have the luxury of making those decisions on what is appropriate, because, your audience may be okay with that still, right? Or maybe you're doing more in TikTok, and TikTok is completely cool with backward hat stuff. So I do think that, like, it's nice to have the choice. And that really is why, like, these formats of video podcasting are so wonderful, because you have choices and you have intention that you can extract, that you can, propel and promote. And then you can make this decision to say no if you feel like it's dated, or your brand has changed, or your individual looks drastically different than they did last year. I think it's really going to probably play out on a case by case basis.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was thinking of is that Greg Alexander line, that products are sold, services are bought. Do you think that knowing the face behind the brand, the values behind it, is that more powerful than for professional services and B2B sales?
Yeah, I think just the authority and trust is so critical in the B2B space. But I will tell you that I think we're seeing this evolve in so many brand categories, even products and consumer-based products where we never thought that people would have cared about the founder of their toothpaste brand, or something that's so low decision friction. And now all of a sudden they want to know the story. They want to know the products. They want to know, the production methods. There's a lot more curiosity that consumers across the board are requiring. But I think B2B space, even maybe, well, definitely more so than the consumer space. But I think the B2B space is even growing because there's just so many options out there. And people just want to call someone and say, please help me. How can I give me 5 options from the 500 that are out there? And this is a great format to build that trust, is to give advice and give recommendations and be the person that they go to for narrowing down the choice fatigue.
It's for a decade, we've been told one funnel away, right? And it's interesting that even, the last Funnel Hacking Live is happening this year, and they're saying it doesn't work anymore. And there's something new that they're going to be pitching, but it's like that idea of we've got that fatigue, right? And if funnels worked so well for B2B sales and high ticket sales, Ernst & Young and McKinsey would be selling off of Facebook ads and funnels. And I think if you look at them, they're building off of relationships, just like you were talking about. And you're able to give people relationships at scale through these little clips that you're repurposing that show up when they want, where they want.
Yeah. And they are able to kind of make their own curiosities, either proven or not proven. One of my favorite ways that I think the trust is built in professional services or B2B sales is relationships, like you said. And I think one of the big goals of marketing for that is to make those referrals easy, make those referrals scalable, make those referrals independent of time, right? So that you don't have to be on a call with someone in order for them to have an understanding of who you are, what you believe, or how you approach the problem that they may have. And I think when you start looking at it like that, it becomes less complicated, right? Okay, how are we going to make referrals easy? How are we going to remove barriers? How are we going to remove questions about who and how? And these formats work for that, right? Just that's a good starting point. Just start answering questions, bringing people on that kind of help address those problems. And it's a lot, I think, more approachable to get started than it ever has been in the past.
I've seen the people that get the best results from the podcast interviews, like you said, are the ones that are repurposing the content. And most people think, okay, for social media. But what you were talking about there, that's powerful too. Though, before the sales call, hey, our founder was on this podcast talking about this specific topic. Or, here's common questions that people have. Here's some information to help you prepare for the sales call, because they'd rather, save their time too. And so from that standpoint, it brings that intimacy. And I loved how you said being able to do referrals at scale on that.
Yeah. And I think, don't forget about onboarding, especially in the midst of for B2B, right? You close a deal, there's some sort of got your information, going to be moving to your internal process. But there's always a lag between when the proposal is executed and when they get to the next step of your process, right? That's a great spot to give them some of that high still that they just bought, of hyping them up, getting them excited, making sure that they still feel like they're being attended to without, maybe that in person or high touch points. And these recordings can work really well for that. The other thing that I think is a huge opportunity that is mostly missed on this is on the recruitment side. And really helping employees understand this, because they should have, regardless of their role, understandings of a lot of, what's going out there on behalf of the business, the way that the business approaches something, the way the founder views something. It's a really great, just kind of a quick learning opportunity for new hires during the hiring process, like 6 months in, when they've finally got their head around the day-to-day, and now you're expecting them to remember everything from orientation, right? Like, it's a good way to be like, okay, here's a entertainment that piece that you can watch.
As you said that, it was like, how many times on a podcast have we told the founder's story? Right. And it's something that you want to share maybe with new clients, definitely with new team members. And you don't want to have to sit down and tell that story over and over and over. But what a great way for training and onboarding to share and say, the story behind Chatter Kick is important to who you are, what you do. And I just wanted to share this interview that I did outlining all of that. Right. And it saves you time. It gives them a lot of value there too.
Yeah. And I think especially one thing I've learned just in the hiring process in our organization, and it's so obvious, but sometimes it's hidden in companies. We overwhelm people in the first 30, 60 days with onboarding, orientation, training, all the things, right? And then we expect them to remember that indefinitely throughout their time. And I think sometimes, like the founder story, sometimes those emotional connections, they still need to be done in the beginning, but there's definitely a point after the dust kind of settles a little bit to have people connect with the brand history, the story, the founder, values, when it just feels a little bit less like I'm drinking from a hose, right? And I think that these are great ways to kind of repurpose that content internally as well.
Yeah, and that ties back into the podcast interviews of doing them with a topic from the very beginning. So often I warn people, don't do Groundhog's Day interview, right? Don't do the same interview over and over. You'll get bored. The audience will get bored, and your team won't be able to repurpose it. But if you're like, okay, here's the questions we've had. Here are the different topics. Here's the things that we want to focus on next quarter for our marketing, to be able to do those interviews this quarter and then use that content next quarter can be a very powerful way.
Yeah. And I think too, like, watch your own behavior as a consumer of these things, whether that's video podcast only, audio podcast only. I don't think you should make sweeping assumptions based on that, but sometimes people's own behaviors, or your families or your kids, can give you indications about what to be more curious about, right? Like, one thing I've noticed from a trend perspective in podcast interviews is people get a little bored with the long history of the guest in the beginning, because some guests don't know where to start. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself question could go all the way back to like, well, I grew up, and sometimes that's context to the interview. And if it's a good storyteller, I think sometimes, that works. But other times that becomes so much of the podcast that the topic gets lost. And, again, watch your own behavior. If you're skipping through some of that stuff, maybe other people are as well.
Jeff Barch teaches on that. And we had an interview with him, and he's like, you show up and you say, who am I? Why am I here? Why should you listen to me? Right? That's all that people want on that first question, no matter what it is. If you've got your backstory and you can work that in later, that's fine. But, nobody wants to know all of the background. They're always there for what they can learn and apply to their life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's a really good feedback from him, because I do see that happen a lot, especially if you're not an experienced interviewer. That's usually the first question you start with. And it's, there's tricks of the trade as you do more of them, as you know, Tom.
And one of the things that I'm always big on is I want to learn from other people's mistakes, right? Anybody that says it's good to learn from your own mistakes, no, that's painful, right? So what mistakes have you seen people make that hurts them on the repurposing? What things should they avoid?
I think one thing you mentioned is just too crazy of backgrounds or whether that's dress or just kind of take a look at your visuals and make sure that whatever you have in the background is like, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever, fix it a little bit. So I think that that's one thing that is important. Same with like hairstyles or outfits or anything with dress, just neutral is best. Don't get too crazy for that stuff, because again, that sometimes can definitely date podcasts. And then just be cautious of and conscious, I would say, of just some of the topics that you're addressing. And if you do talk about like a trend or a timely piece, maybe put it all together in one piece of the episode so that it's not interwoven through the conversation, because that is tricky to edit or manipulate. But if it's just a piece of like the trends for this next year, and you kind of go through that could be edited out and your video could still be used for other pieces of marketing.
Do you think people should listen and watch their recordings?
Oh, totally. Yes.
Oh,
I think that people should, because I think especially if you are in the moment, you probably don't remember what you actually said. I will have my team pull out quotes and I'm like, well, that sounded pretty good. I had no idea I said that. I'm just having a conversation. But I do think listening is important.
So many people, it's like, I don't want to watch myself because I look funny, or I don't want to hear or listen because I sound funny. And while I can understand that, there's also professionals watch the game film, because I can tell you, I thought that went great. And then when you actually watch the film, it's like, well, I guess when I shot, I wasn't above the rim, right? My feet barely left the ground. So it's important to do that. The other thing that I did one time, and it helped me, was my team let me edit a video. I never realized I said the word that many times. And seeing it every time in the transcript, that made me conscious of it. And I still probably do it way too much, but it's that feedback where we're always getting better, not to get self-conscious, but to get better.
Yeah, I think you should all do that. We do that with our team for reporting meetings, for client presentations. It's not ever to beat someone down or point out their flaws. It's a matter of surfacing the information and bringing it to light and being better and learning, right? We all want to do that.
Well, Beth, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. And you've always been at the forefront of doing more with the content, not just doing more content. And people don't have a content creation problem. They've got a content capture problem. And then a big problem is how to organize that and use that for the maximum impact.
Yes, I think you said it well. If people are really, struggling in their marketing, I always tell them, look at the marketing operations before looking at the actual leads, or say, like, everybody goes to number of leads or number of marketing qualified leads. And in most cases, it's not about that. It's about the operations side of things. I've seen it time and time again. So start with your marketing operations and then figure out positioning and content plans, etc.
Yeah. If you just want more leads on your next podcast interview, say you're giving away a Tesla, and just come back to the website and sign up for it. You'll get lots of leads, no customers, but lots of leads.
Right.
Well, Beth, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more, if they want to learn about ChatterKick and all the great things that you guys do?
So luckily, our name is pretty much all of our social media handles. So it's ChatterKick, ChatterKick, not ChatterClick, ChatterKick. And then my contact information is all over the website, but they can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And it's just Beth Trejo, Trejo.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tom.
What an incredible conversation with Beth Trejo. Today, if you're wondering how to get the most mileage from every podcast appearance, Beth just gave you the roadmap. From turning transcripts into treasure troves of building trust and authority through authentic content. Her insights are actionable and inspiring. Now, here's your next step. Don't let your content stop at the interview. Think repurposing. Think efficiency. Take the clips, the quotes, and the themes from your interviews and use them all across their social platforms, in your onboarding materials, your sales processes. It's gold. And if you need inspiration or want to see a master at work, well, check out Beth's agency, Chatterkick. Trust me, it's worth the click. And as always, if you found today's episode helpful, share it with someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps bring more people these impactful conversations. Next week, we'll be talking about how to make these sound bites that you can repurpose when we talk with the amazing Michelle Prince. She's going to outline the art of the soundbite. Until next time, let's amplify your voice, grow your business, and turn listeners into leads. See you soon.